Hello and welcome to Movies and Tea After Hours. And tonight we are talking about Love, Death and Robots Season 2. I'm your host always, Elwood Jones, and joining me of course is my co-host, the one and only Miss Kim Lowe.
Hello.
As we said, we are going to be talking about Love, Death and Robots Season 2. You may remember a few After Hours episodes ago that we did cover the whole of Season 1 before, and I think we were both in agreement it was a fun time.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So obviously with the announcement of Season 2, which I was kind of reassured that they finally gave us a trailer because it was quite a long wait. It felt like since the end of Season 1, and there was this horrible nagging feeling that it was never going to happen. I mean, that was back in 2019. We're now here in 2021, and we finally have the 6-episode run of Season 2, and we've obviously got another run coming up next year as well, which is nice and reassuring. I think, as I said, as we'll probably get into as we go through the episodes of this season, it was certainly a change of pace, I think, to the first season. I don't know about yourself, Kim, but this one was a little more toned down than the first season.
Yeah, it was. I mean, on top of that, the segments felt shorter. The topics felt a little bit more, I guess, I don't know what you would call it. I don't know if you have a word for it. That it seems a little bit less extreme, I guess, in some ways.
Definitely so. I think, I certainly enjoyed the variety of stories that we had on offer with this volume. I felt that they really sort of hit some interesting topics as they did with the first season, and it also manages to blend that line between you having really funny stories and then you have stories which are a little more serious, a little more action orientated. So it was a good blend in there. I don't think that with this season we had that sort of like those sort of standout episodes that we had in the first season with like Beyond the Aquila Rift or which is obviously the one that always comes to mind when you think of like those stories with the amazing sort of twist in them. Whereas this season it seemed more focused on just giving directors an opportunity to just tell interesting stories, which I think is what they've certainly achieved, at least with this season.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the variety is good of the different premises, and they do cover kind of different scenes of the covering topics of love, death, robots, and all that stuff. And I think that one of the things is really the animation style really also has a lot of variety, and that's something that I personally really enjoy.
Yeah. What we're going to do on tonight's episode, we're going to go through all the episodes in this volume. In the previous time we did Love, Death and Robots, we broke it down to genres, which I don't think is going to really be necessary this season because it's really quite short. I was really surprised. I was expecting like a big chunk of episodes, but I think as with the new Netflix model where everything's, as I think you were telling me before we came on air tonight, that everything sort of dropped down in the number of episodes that they do per season. Now it used to be quite a few episodes, and now they're dropping down to like 6 episodes per season now. So
yeah, I honestly think it's just because of the pandemic that things are not moving as much, or maybe it's just the fact that they're creating shorter seasons in order to have more material come out faster, I guess. I don't know what the reason is, honestly, but it's something that I've noticed. I mean, when I watch docuseries, or when I watch like even when you talk about Ugly Delicious, they dropped from, I think it was like 8 episodes to 4 episodes. And when you watch shows like that, it's like 4 episodes, like 2 seconds, and you're done watching it.
Kicking off this season, we had automated customer service, in which we look at a futuristic retirement community, which is basically staffed by robotic helpers that handle everything from walking your dog to cleaning your house. And it's here that we meet the elderly woman Jeanette, who lives with her little yappy dog, and finds herself under attack from a vacuum bot when it decides that it's going to engage its purge mode and try and kill her. This is a really fun twist on the automated home going rogue. We've seen it a couple of times in things such as like Demon Seed and Home Wrecker. So to see it again here and given us much more comedic slant, especially because it's old people, was a lot of fun. I think this was one of the early highlights of the season. I think just from the start, it really sort of hit those comedic beats really well. And as it goes on, just how it manages to keep amping it up, and the fact that you're dealing with old people just made it even more sort of humorous, really.
Yeah, no, automated customer service is really fun. I think that as a starting type of episode for the season, it's a really great way because it really blends in a lot of different genres, and at the same time you have this I think the topic is also familiar enough, but they give it a decent little twist, especially because you play with the whole modern day versus like technology, but then she's trying to talk to a representative, and just these little conversations that you have really highlights that world that she's in right now, where this future is where technology has taken over for the most part, and talking to a customer service person right now takes a long time, but in the future when it's all run by robots, it takes 6 hours to talk to an actual person, which is just ridiculous. And there's a lot of these like really over exaggerated bits, which adds a lot of to the comedy as well. And the whole conversation really with this whole automated customer service is kind of it's at the same time ridiculous as it is funny, and at the same time, while she's trying to not get killed by her vacuum bot, you have these two kind of different levels of, I think, threats in your life,
I love it most fun when you mentioned about the customer service, the idea that you can either speak to a machine and you speak and get it sort of automatically, or it's like a 6-hour wait to speak to a person, and it just plays in perfectly into this idea where we have now, where you phone any of these services and you just like want to speak to somebody, but you can never speak to someone because you're going to go for the automated service. So the fact that the customer services is automated as well was just really kind of funny. And when it starts off and you got the robot helper, they're basically trying to adjust the pitch, and she keeps moving it back, and it keeps moving it back again, and then it just goes completely sort of nuts, as though it's been like offended, was just great. The fact she does yoga as well was just bizarre, though. But I was like kind of glad that they found a way to like justify why she's doing yoga, other than just to have it really kind of this sort of bulbous woman doing a headstand.
Well, I mean, it's not that weird. I didn't find the yoga bit that weird, but I mean, at the same time, it was really, I think it is pretty, the whole idea of this story, I think, really amps up till the end, where you see this, not only do you see this, neighbor that shows up, but at the same time, you also end this on this kind of note where you wonder whether all this technology amounts to one main thing, and that is whether it's planned for this to be just kind of making you buy more, because at the end, you have your customer service, which leads you into this stuff, and then it leads you into purge mode, and then purge mode leads to more more intense things, and then you have this whole thing where you can be on this termination, what is it, whitelist or something? I can't remember what it is.
Oh yeah,
blacklist. I can't remember.
Yeah, you're basically on the termination blacklist, where all machines will now turn against you and try and hunt you down, unless you want to buy a reset code.
Yeah, pretty much, right? And then at that point, it's like, what I went through my head was, is this like all just a scheme, like the automated customer service? All of this that they're doing is they're directing you into creating the situation where you either make it out alive and have to buy further into their program, or choose to live on the edge type of thing.
It always seems to be the way whenever we like have a society which is like fully automated, where we just become like basic lazy slobs and the machines do everything. And you can see the examples of this where it always hits the point where the machines sort of like have enough and turn on their masters, and you can see it in like the Animatrix Second Renaissance, which was like how the Matrix came to be, where we basically had automated everything and we're enjoying this sort of fat life, and the robots turn on humanity. And we see it in WALL-E. The computer turns on humanity. We're all too busy being fat and riding around in hover chairs when the machines have secretly been taken over.
No, I mean there's been a lot of short films, in the recent years, whether it's indie or not. If you ask me to say one on the top of my head, I can't remember the names, but I mean, I have seen a few shorts in indie festivals and stuff like that, where it is about topics like this. Obviously, those are with actual humans, but I mean, like the topic here is not that weird, but I think that the concept of having this vacuum-bot that has these like modes that are set inside of them already, right?
Yeah.
I mean, most of the time you talk about robots, they're about them being corrupted. But in this one, it's not about corruption. This mode is literally set inside of this this cleaning robot that lives with you, which is kind of ridiculous, right? It's like a hidden program that's been already in there.
Yeah, it is a fun one. I mean, the story itself is by John Scalzi, who's probably most noteworthy for doing Oman's War. The film itself is directed by Meat Department, who are Corinne Danver-Mirin, David Nicholas, and Laurent Nicholas. And I just love the fact that because they're a collective, so it's always like adapted by script by John Scalzi and Meat Department. It's like of all the things you can name yourselves, Meat Department. But yeah, this is the actual animation for this one's is kind of fun. It reminded me of in the first season when the yogurt took over. It's the characters are kind of bulbous, kind of rounded. It's when you look at how everyone else is animating the rest of the season, this one's probably the least realistic when it comes in terms of the animation, but I think it still worked really well, and it fits well with the humorous style of this story. So
yeah, definitely.
Should we move on?
Yes.
Cool. Next up we have Ice, which is directed by Robert Valley. Robert Valley was in the previous season. He did Zima Blue. Oh,
okay. Yeah, well, you can really see the animation style have that jive that it reflects each other really well.
Yeah. His visual style is very sort of influenced by the Gorillaz creator Jamie Hewlett, who also did Tank Girl, and also Peter Chung, who did Aeon Flux. So it's got a very sort of like comic book style to it. And I think with Ice, he certainly sort of steps it up to that next level, because also with Zima Blue, it was a very distinctive style, but it was a very sort of simple story. And then when we look at Ice, it's really him bringing that same animation style, but this time applying it to action. And certainly with this story, it gives us some of the most memorable sort of sequences when we saw that trailer, and you see the big whale rising up against the lightning backdrop, and that's taken from this story where you got these two brothers, Sedgwick and Fletcher, who are living on an ice-covered colony planet where most of the population have been genetically modified, and Sedgwick hasn't been modified, so he's just completely normal, unlike his brother. And basically, if you've been modified, you've got like these superhuman abilities, and if you're not, you're basically branded as an outcast. And Sedgwick basically really sort of rebelling against it. He doesn't want to be stuck in this colony. He's resentful of his parents for not having him modded and keeping him normal, and he decides he's going to join his brother on this race with several of the other youths of the colony across the ice floes, in the hopes that it will also give them a chance to catch a glimpse of the frost whales that breach through the ice. So essentially they're going to run from this one point away from the colony back to the colony and avoid these whales that are going to burst through. And it's a simple story, but I think the art style really sort of raises it above what it could have been if someone else had handled it. And especially when you see like the real sort of climax of this story is these they're running away from these cracking ice floes, and you see these huge whales like rising up. It's just really quite stunning to look at. So
definitely, I mean, Ice is, I think the first thing that stands out for Ice is absolutely its art style. It really stands out in this group of stories also for this season, so art style wise. And when you talk about the world, they actually, in that little sequence, managed to build this world quite a bit. I mean, throughout this one, we go through a lot of kind of different it feels like different colonies that are away from Earth or different planets or that sort of thing. So we kind of venture a little bit everywhere, or at least a changed landscape of maybe like an alternate kind of reality, I guess.
Yeah.
For Ice, the world itself, and right away it sets the tone of where just from the actions and the scenes you see how the two brothers are different, just from the walk to the actual where the race is. And the interaction between the two, you really can see, the environment where, being modded and not modded, the view that people has on you and the way they kind of criticize you in that sense. But when you do the run, it really highlights, I think, on the relationship of the brothers, and I guess really seeing that Fletcher, I don't know whether he has, it's, you go through this thing where he actually gets caught in the ice, and Sedge has to save him, and as they are running together, you really see the bond that they have together in a certain way. And I think in some ways it's also the ending of this is where you get an idea, you kind of have this question mark of whether all this was staged.
Yeah.
But you are right. I think the highlight of this is not only the art style, but it's also, I think, the frost whale coming out is such a incredible scene in itself, and shows so much of this animation style and this, imagination and creativity. In some ways, I kind of want to see this world being taken to a full-length movie to see what they can do in a world like this, with frost whales, with modded humans, and whatever, right? Because there seems like that this kind of premise has so much more to dig in, and like what other creatures can you create in this Iceland and that sort of thing.
Oh, definitely so. I think this is like a colony that would be really interesting to return to at some point. And in many ways, it reminds me of the movie Gattaca, where everyone's sort of destiny is predetermined by the genetic code. And obviously, with this one, you look at Sedgwick and he sort of like pretty much looks like he's going to be the one destined to be carried by his brother. And alternately, it turns out the other way when Fletcher gets caught. And so we're just forced to carry him, and it's like this idea that, there's no comparison to the human spirit. So it doesn't matter how your body are, the human spirit sort of like can push on and do these incredible things when push comes to shove. And I think the fact that his desire to obviously save his brother from being like crushed by a giant ice whale, I think was really sort of highlighted that. And yeah, you're watching it, and as I said, when you finally sort of hit on like what's going to happen, I think that it really becomes really interesting. And because I weren't sure where it was going to go when it started. I was like, oh, where's this one going to go? And then we get out onto the ice, and it just looks so stunning. I think if you enjoyed the art style of Zima Blue, I think this just takes it to a whole new other level, especially with the ice effects and just like how this wasteland looks and how the colony looks as well. It's just so much interesting design detail in there. But it almost I also like the fact that they actually bring in, I feel like it's a bit of a maybe a parallel or similarity to say when there's these Indian tribes, I watched it somewhere before where they kind of smoke this thing and then they have these illusions and stuff like that. I don't know what it's called, okay? But it almost feels like that when there's one segment before they do this race and then they're smoking in this thing, and then suddenly that ice effect shows up and you really like this I don't know if it's a hallucination or an amplification of your senses or whatever, but that whole sequence for that short amount of 30 seconds, 20 seconds, whatever, was just really, really like really it was able to show how great, I think, in general, this animation and the style that it is, and just how visually very eye-catching. Yeah, definitely so. Next up we had Pop Squad. This is a story which I think would have been really interesting if they expanded it into a full feature. But it's directed by Jennifer Ewan Nelson, who directed the last two Kung Fu Panda movies. So exactly the sort of person you think of when it comes to telling a story about a dystopian future where we traded out the rights to procreate for drug-induced biological immunity. I know it's my go-to director for that sort of story. But yeah, basically in this future, breeding is strictly forbidden, and any children that are found are executed by this police force while the parents are sort of prosecuted. And through this for this story that we follow Detective Briggs, who is become very disillusioned by the world around him. His lover Alice has got sort of like, it's very sort of casual to this idea that, you know, we're just like living in this world where we can have immortality, but we've sort of sacrificed it at the cost of having children. And that he's basically being forced to execute children just to maintain this social balance. And it's through this Blade Runner-esque sort of world that he stumbles across this woman who's buying an antique toy train set, because in this world children's toys are like antiques. And he basically finds that she's been harboring a daughter called Melanie, and he basically finds, just through talking to her, like realizes that, you know, children give you a reason to live, because after 2 centuries, as she explains, that everything has become like dull. There is nothing new to discover in life, and children make everything new again. This is why, you know, people are choosing to have children and go against the rules of society, whereas you got other people that are just happy to like perfect their social status just by completely rejuvenating themselves over and over again. But yeah, I really enjoyed Pop Squad. I think because it taps into that Blade Runner-esque world, I think it really made me wish that they'd done this as like a full feature. But as a sample, I thought it was really good.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Pop Squad is no doubt, you know, I didn't realize it was a Kung Fu Panda director that did it. But I mean, I think that this one is definitely a highlight, and probably one that we can probably draw the most comparison when you're thinking about something that's produced by David Fincher, I guess, this time rather than, I don't know.
Yes, Mark it's Tim Miller and David Fincher, the down as the producers of this the show.
So
I think
because
David Fincher's just an executive though.
Yeah, I think that in some ways, if you think about it, if someone had to say about anything, Pop Squad would definitely be kind of like a Fincher choice, especially, you know, based on, you know, upcoming, we're going to be talking about Fincher. It's a really good way to bring it in type of thing also. But at the same time, you know, Pop Squad also has a really great voice cast in many ways. I mean, you do have, you know, the elusive Nolan North, who you can recognize his voice a million miles away. Huh?
I was wondering if you pick up on his performance.
Oh no, it's you know, as gamers and you know, people who watch a lot of TV in general, Nolan North is kind of, you know, you can pick him up because he's very, very, his voice is so familiar, especially after you watched him in Uncharted for, you know, 3 games and you know, many of his other voice acting roles. He is really, you know, kind of just really outstanding in the voice as a voice actor. And for this one, I think it fits his role a lot, especially because I actually think the face kind of matches his a little in some ways. But I mean, you also have Elodie Yung as Alice, who I'm sure I've seen her in something, but I can't remember off the top of my head right now. But yeah, no, I mean, Pop Squad is definitely one that has the most kind of a deeper storyline. It creates this future in the world that is very dark, very, you know, very sci-fi. It has a kind of a balance of everything. And you can really see this whole chase of immortality that people have, where what expense it has on the society itself. And, you know, is immortality as much as you bargain for, right? I mean, in some ways, if you're having immortality, you lose out on living because you there's nothing to live for anymore, you know? Like, there's only so much you can do. Like, I mean, if you think about the girl, she's like, oh, immortality and the reju injections or whatever you call it can create can let her figure out perfect her singing in 20 years, you know? And you're just like, well, what type of life is that? And then when you think about the people who, you know, obviously when you talk about Briggs, he brings into this thing where he starts seeing, I guess, he starts questioning the things that he's doing and the purpose behind all of this. So when that conversation with the mother really happens, he starts seeing the joy of children.
Yeah.
And the joy of just having this, a world where you can actually have younger children who are very pure and have all these feelings and emotions, which it seems like the people, because they've lived for so long, seemed to have lost.
Well, we remember, I mean, the woman he finds, Eve, she says that she's been alive for 2 centuries. So this is not something that's just recently happened. These people have been living a very long time. And you kind of understand that Briggs has been doing this for that long a time, that it's going to eventually get to you after a while. Like, no matter what you're sort of indoctrinated with, and you're going to hit that point of, like, well, what does it all mean? And I think this is what we basically come in on, him having that moment. And as you said, it's all like, well, what's there to really sort of achieve if you've got unlimited time to do it? There's only so many fancy parties you can go to, only so many skills you can learn. And it's sort of like, what is the end goal here? So, but no, I think it would have been really interesting to see this expanded out into a full feature. Maybe it will happen down the line. Right? You never know with these things. This may just be like a test run and get turned into something down the line. But no, Jeffrey Nelson, one of only 2 women to direct a full-length animated feature for a major Hollywood studio. She's also the supervising director for this season. But no, certainly when you look at, I was looking through her sort of credits. I mean, she starts off as a production illustrator and story artist on Dark City. Back in '98, and then from there it's just children's movies as far as the eye can see. Although she did do some directing work for Tom McFarlane's Spawn series for HBO, which was again kind of dark, but certainly when we look at this, though, it's like Kung Fu Panda, Madagascar, Spirit, Stallion and the Cameroonian. But
in some ways, you know, Pop Squad does switch the story around. It is a lot darker, but it does include, you know, that idea of children in this world as well. Obviously, they're not the main characters here, but there is a focus on, I guess, these children who are being literally disposed of, and you know, they're considered unregistered offspring and stuff. And you really can see what this world has become when population control becomes, you know, the center. The center of how this place is maintained.
Also with this episode, it really sort of was one of the first episodes this season where we saw like a super realistic animation style.
Yes.
Yes. And you look at like the details of like the ruined city where Eve's living, and you've got the backdrop, and it's all this dilapidated city, and this like wooden hut that she lives in that's been built in the middle of these ruins. It looks absolutely stunning. Next up, we had Snow in the Desert, which seems to be everyone's personal favourite when we've talked to anyone about this one. I think mainly because it's got a Mandalorian vibe to it. Snow is an albino man who's got a unique ability that his body continually regenerates and has essentially rendered him immortal. So he's currently hiding out from a group of bounty hunters who are trying to get his balls. And it's here that he encounters a woman who turns out to be a cyborg, and the two find a bond over the desire of the fact that neither of them are going to die ever. So essentially that they would have this partnership where they would just be able to live forever. But at the same time, other group of bounty hunters are determined to hunt Snow down, leading to a memorable confrontation. again, another short that's just really stunningly animated, hyper realistic. I think this one and Life's Hutch had this super realistic style to them, so it's just astounding what animation can do now when you look at the detail and just how realistic these models look. And then you have like a short like Over the House where it's stop motion and it's suddenly like really jarring because you get used to this sort of animated style that they're having, and then you have like a sudden shift in like to stop motion. It's like, oh, that's a bit different. So
yeah, no, Snow in the Desert, I mean, I can see why people would like this one. It definitely, I think it feels a lot more, in some ways, I actually think Snow in the Desert feels a lot more mainstream, in terms of the story that it's trying to tell and the world that it's built, set in kind of, you know, a desert, and you have this, I guess you can, I've never watched Mandalorian, but I've seen, like, images and stuff of it, of the show. But I mean, I can definitely see the connection between the two. But then, I mean, when you think about barren wastelands, it's always the same type of thing. You always have that, you know, it's kind of like Mad Max Fury Road, right? You have that same type of desert, and how people are dressed are similar, and you have these people in their funky, I don't know, human designs. I don't know if they're human or not anymore. You know, like the bounty hunters look very, I guess they even look very like Mad Max style, like Mad Max Fury Road style in some ways.
Kind of reminiscent to like Riddick and that. It's that sort of gritty nomad sort of style, isn't it? So yeah.
But I mean, Snow in the Desert is interesting because you really get to see this character, and it's really focused on this person, and well, these two people, him and the girl, who in the beginning we think she's really just a girl, until obviously something happens and then you realize that she is a cyborg. And I mean, it is really nice, I think, the story. I think it's done really well. But if you think about, like, oh, what is there to talk about for this one? I really don't know. I just think it's a good one, but I feel it lacks the uniqueness of some of the other ones. Other than obviously, like, visually, it is very realistic. The first moment that what's his
Snow,
name?
yeah.
Is his name Snow? I don't even know. Yeah, the moment that Snow enters the scene, you really almost think he's like a real person. But then as you watch the scene, you kind of realize it's an animation, right?
That's right. This is the jarring thing when you see just how nice this animation looks, and it's not the fact it's even the same animation studio handling. I mean, this was by Unit Image, and then we look at Life Hutch, which is by Blur Studio. So Blur Studio also did Pop Squad as well, so that's why the animation is kind of similar between the two. But just how realistic it looks is just so good. But Blur Studio did quite a few episodes in this season. They also did The Drowned Giant as well, which we'll come to in a minute as well. So I think they carried most of the work on this season, but at the same time managed to really show some diversity of work. So, but Snow in the Desert, I think, is the one episode which encompasses the three main themes of what Love, Death, and Robots is, as it features both love, death, and robots. So yeah, for sure. I mean, love it. I mean, Snow in the Desert. I think in reality it is pretty balanced. It's just a really decent watch because you have a really great world. You have a kind of the characters are fairly well polished for, you know, the short the length of the short. But it also has, you know, a lot of more I guess more of a emotional side as well to it, as well as some action. So there's a lot of everything involved, and as a movie itself, it kind of has that, you know, up and down moment where, you know, there's like climax moment, and then it kind of ends in the way that it does. Next up, we got the Tall Grass, which is another one I really enjoyed. This one's directed by Simon Otto, who was the head of character animation for the How to Train Your Dragon trilogy. So this one sees a train breaking down next to a field of tall grass. While the passengers get off to investigate the strange sounds and lights he sees in the grass, only to soon discover that it's a bunch of ghoul-like creatures that are determined to attack him as he desperately tries to find his way back to the train. For some reason, when I think of the tall grass, I just instantly think of like the Stephen King story that was also on Netflix. But no, this is something completely different. So,
well, Netflix has had a lot of tall grass lately, so I don't know. Isn't there a movie called, like, recently, wasn't there an indie horror?
Yeah, that's the one I was thinking of. I was thinking, oh, is this what happens in that one? I wasn't sure it's like a different take, but no, this one's got like an almost painting style to it. It looks like everything's been like hand painted, but
yeah, definitely.
It's got sort of set in that sort of like old timey Wild West sort of setting as well, which is really great because I love when you do an alternate take on the Wild West genre, if it be it like the Eastern Westerns, such as like Let the Bullets Fly, or Shinjuku Western Django, or Good, the Bad, and Weird, or certainly in this than like American ones like Bone Tomahawk, which gave us like cannibals in the Wild West, and this one gives us weird albino monsters in the Wild West, essentially.
Yeah, I think you know it's interesting in some ways because like Tall Grass is kind of like a blend of a lot of different things. It's like kind of like a little horror short. You know, once the horror starts, it turns into this like frantic run for or run just searching for an exit type of thing. And you know I think what I like most about the Tall Grass, as you already mentioned, is the art style. Right away you have this. You can call it painting. For me, I almost feel like the skin almost feels like it's like, I think the best way is it's like Layers of Fear, like the game Layers of Fear. It has that type of texture of the painting, but at the same time, it almost feels like when you talk about the main character, he almost feels like his skin is like wood. You know, like the paint you have on like a wooden toy or something like that.
Yeah, I know what you mean. So.
I think it's such a... The art style is so different from the rest of the stories here also. That's what makes it stand out. I mean, the story itself is really short, so it's paced really quickly. Things happen super fast as he's going through and he's moving. It is one that, you know, it's a little bit more predictable also. I guess it's just, you know, we're being the horror veterans that we are. But, you know, you go through this one and you right away, when someone tells you to not wander, you know they're going to wander. And then you know they're going to get lost. You kind of have an idea of what's going to happen.
I was surprised that you managed to make it out, to be honest.
Yeah, exactly. I almost thought because of, you know, the theme of death in this one, that there would be some type of like horrific death, or maybe like he's gonna transform into, you know, this character or whatever. And that was gonna be like the big twist of what these monsters are in the fields. But I think Tall Grass leaves a lot of, you know, it leaves a lot of questions because a lot of what they know, like what the conductor is talking to him about, is really, you know, word of mouth, like what people think is the situation or whatnot. And it is very odd as well to have these creatures, because where are they coming out from? Are they coming out from the ground? Are they coming out from the grass? Are they, you know, and then they're talking about a portal. Where is all this light coming from? And then you think about it, well, if they're in a field, why wouldn't they be albino? Because, you know, if we think about the logic of when do we see albino creatures, they're either in caves or they're in, you know, like when you talk about The Descent, or when you talk about even a recent movie that we saw was 47 Meters Down Uncaged, where there's like albino sharks, right? And
I just assume it was the moonlight that makes her skin translucent, so that's why they glow in the light.
That could be it too. Yeah, that's a good point.
Sorry to shoot your theory down here, there, but...
No, but I'm just saying, like, I mean, that's an interesting thing. Overthinking, right? That's what I'm doing. But maybe it is a very, very simple type of answer like that.
I think the real effective part of this story is just at the end when the train conductor like confides him. It's like, every now and again the train will break down at this spot, and it's sort of like, but I wouldn't tell people; they wouldn't believe you. And it's just like that sting in the tail. It's sort of like he knew all the while what's going on out there, and this is why he tells him to stay on the train. And it's his own stupid curiosity that invokes the wrath of these monsters that are lurking in the tall grass.
Yeah, and I think that the ending of this is so great. Not only with that conversation and how it ends, but also like when the train is driving away, you have just angle onto the field, and then you just see the light kind of lighting up across the tall grass.
Yeah. I think tall grass is just underused horror thing. It's like in Children of the Corn, just having something lurking in the cornfields.
Well, I really think, it really depends on how something's executed, right? I watched an Australian movie that was like that too. Had a lot of tall grass.
Yeah.
I can't remember the name right now. But it was like The Swamp or something like that. Some swampy one. I can't remember what it was. Something about a swamp. And it was and that one was okay, like in terms of what they were creating, but it had a lot of like execution issues.
Yeah.
So I think it really dials down. I do believe that tall grass is something that can be used really well. I haven't watched Into Tall Grass. I don't know if you have.
No,
so,
I just I have a vague
idea. I think that was
idea.
about hallucinations. I think it's like grass where you go in and then you start having hallucinations or something.
Yeah. But
so I don't know. I don't know what the deal with that one is, but it is definitely like, because tall grass is, there's a lot of dangers to it. One, sometimes you can make them into really sharp and then they can cut you, so you can't run really fast in it. And then, there's a lot of like dangers and like you can't see above of where you are, and you get and then there's like no sense of direction. So it is a really good like horror premise, depending on, how it's used.
Next up, we had a great companion piece to Night Before Christmas, as we had All Through the House. A little early for a festive short, so I felt kind of weird watching a festive short at this time of the year, but had to be done.
Well, I just rewatched Anna and the Apocalypse, so I can watch Christmas things anytime.
We also have the shortest of this block of episodes. As it's set on Christmas Eve, and a brother or sister hear something rustling downstairs and, believing it to be Santa, sneak down to catch a look. Only it's not Santa. Well, he's not in the traditional form anyway, as they meet a grotesque monster who then proceeds to judge them good or bad. I really liked All Through the House. It's charming and goes a little too quick, but I think it's got a real good end note on it, and just the actual monster design's a lot of fun as well. Even though it's very heavily influenced by the xenomorph from Alien.
Yeah, absolutely.
So they lose a little bit of that, even though it's sort of like these weird jazz hands it has over its mouth.
Which is like Pan's Labyrinth, right?
I guess so. It's somewhere between the two, really, isn't it? It's kind of like between the Pale Man and a xenomorph. So if the Pale Man had been,
it really feels like All Through the House is paying some kind of homage to movies that they personally liked in terms of monsters and stuff. So you have, the Pale Man, and then you have the xenomorph type of design compared together, and it's really interesting because, we always talk about Santa, and even have horror movies about Santa being, evil, and we even have him in, as Krampus, which is a kind of a really dark version of Santa Claus.
It's the generic version of Santa Claus, where he's this beast who kidnaps wicked children and that. And this is what I always love about the alternate Christmas, is the fact that you look at different Santas around the world, and it's sort of like you look at the our one over here, and it's so like nice and wholesome, and then you look at like Norway and that, and it's sort of like a little more twisted.
Yes, it's very, very dark. Yeah.
So I think in Japan there's a monk that acts like Santa Claus, and he's got eyes in the back of his head so he can see if children are being naughty, which I always thought was kind of charming. So And then we obviously have like things like rare exports, where the people we assume are Santa are just the elves, and and again like things like Saint, which is another, I think that's Norway, where you've got like the soot covered helpers and stuff. So, but no, I think
well, there's a lot, right? I mean, in here in Montreal, they actually have an exhibit in one of the malls. They've been having it for the past, I think, decade or so, where they put the different Santa Clauses and the different designs, like the different, like how the appearances are of different Santas in different parts of the world. So you have a lot, like you have one that's like completely in black, and then you have another one, obviously, your jolly Saint Nick type of thing, and a lot of them are very different in the mythology behind them.
Yeah.
And different countries, there's different beliefs and what they look like and that sort of thing. And I think that it's Christmas, like alternate Christmas and just Santa in general is underused in the sense that they could be using it in exploring all these different stories behind Santa Claus, where we always get like the happy one. And even when you do alternate Christmas movies, whether it's horror or whatever, it's mostly a lot of Santa being evil or some serial killer, or they have whatever twisted way in determining for kids, or just the setting of Santa or something, right? And all through the house, talking back to, Love, Death, and Robots, it takes him where Santa is now a monster. And he is literally, it's a creature feature. It's a Christmas creature feature, essentially. and the ending note on this is so good because, the kids are asking after, because the monster knows your name, says your name, and then says whether you're nice or not. And they're like, well, what if we weren't nice?
Yeah.
So what would have happened if we weren't nice? And that's like the ending note. And then you're like, well, what would have been? Would he have coughed up coal, or would he have eaten them?
Because that's the thing. If you're judged nice, he regurgitates your presents for you. And they're covered in like slime and God knows what else. And then you see the little kid. I was so sure that when the little kid opens his present, I was like, sure, it's gonna be like Night Before Christmas, be like something horrible and twisted and stuff. But no, it's sort of like he gets a train set. It's like, that's what I asked for. And then you go back upstairs and lie in bed. And it's like, what if we were evil? What if we were bad? And it just hangs in the air. It just ends. It's like just a perfect end note to end it on. But yeah, I think this is what I'm going to show my kids and go, yep, this is totally what happens.
They'll be good forever. This is Santa. This is Santa, okay? Not those fictional ones.
Not what the Cola Company want you to believe. Yeah, I think this is a great companion piece to Night Before Christmas. I think we've been for years been wanting a companion piece, and then Love, Death, and Robots is the thing that gives us a companion piece. But it's a shame it's so short. But at the same time, I think it does what it needs to do and gets out there. So
yeah, definitely.
Next up, we had Life Hutch, starring Michael B. Jordan, which is exciting for people who like him.
Well, I mean, I think Michael B. Jordan is decent. I watched something recently of his also. I can't remember what it was. What did I just watch?
I know.
Pacific Rim Uprising. That's what I watched.
No,
was that?
I don't
was that
him.
Michael? No, that was what's his face there? The Star Wars dude.
Boyega. His name is.
But John.
Yeah,
John
he's
Boyega.
In Creed. And,
yes, that's it.
Yeah, he was Killmonger in Black Panther, and he was responsible for that girl breaking her braces because she got overexcited in the cinema. And he actually
right.
He paid for her to have her braces fixed, which is just really nice of him. And he's also a fan of Dragon Ball, so he's okay in that respect.
I mean, Michael B. Jordan has been in some really good movies. I mean, I haven't watched all of them, but I mean, I have heard some really good things in movies that he's been in. Obviously, I've seen Creed, I've seen
Chronicle.
But I mean, he started in I think his fame was from Fruitvale Station. But I don't really know. I haven't watched that movie either. It's kind of on my list, but I haven't really gotten around to watching
Fruitvale Station was the one that sort of really broke him out because he was in Chronicle before. He was in Black and White. as well. So, but yeah, he was doing other bits of TV and stuff before then. He was in like CSI and The Wire and Sopranos, Friday Night Lights is probably his most noteworthy role. But yeah, he's currently set to make his directorial debut with the imaginatively titled Creed 3, the sequel to Creed 2. I don't know who he's going to be fighting that. I've heard it's going to be Clubber Lang's son, which should be just keeping in track with this. But of course, that's got nothing to do with Love, Death and Robots whatsoever. As here, he plays a space marine who gets shot down on a planet and then has to go to the rescue beacon, only to find that the robot that also lives there has malfunctioned and now sees him as an enemy. So it's a real flashback to our first episode of this season, really. More killer robots. Yes. And reminded me in many ways of the killer robot in Red Planet.
Okay.
You'd be forgiven if you didn't see it. It wasn't very good. But we had...
I have a feeling I might have seen it, but I don't remember right now. I think it was a while back.
Yeah, it had Val Kilmer in it.
Yeah, I might have seen it, but I saw it so long ago that I don't remember anymore.
Because that was the year we had 2 Mars movies, like, back-to-back. Because you occasionally have, like, 2 of the same movies, like, you have Deep Impact and Armageddon came out, you had Volcano and Dante's Peak came out together, you had Alexander and Troy came out at the same time, so sometimes it just works out the way, and that was the year that we just all went to Mars. And both times it sucked. So... But no, Life Hatch is it's a fun one. You obviously have this wounded pilot who, in between battling this robot, which is constantly trying to stalk him around this life capsule, he has these flashbacks to how he ended up on the planet. Again, really nice animation in this one, and super realistic. I mean, it's from Blair Studio again, and this one was written by Harlan Ellison, who has done over 1,700 short stories, novellas, screenplays, comic book scripts, teleplays, essays, and a wide range of criticism of literature, film, television, and print media. Best known for his works include the 1967 Star Trek episode "The City on the Edge of Tomorrow," or Forever. Sorry. Yeah, this was a fun one, even though I thought that How You Trick a Robot Dog was kind of stupid.
I actually thought it was kind of like, it was kind of a play on just how, no matter how advanced technology is, they're programmed to be a certain way. And I think that that's why they put that in as kind of like the comedic moment where it turns it around, where this very lethal sort of corrupted robot turns around and is actually, is able to be defeated in that way. But I think that, the whole concept of it is a lot of just, him playing dead.
it was
the whole thing spends a lot of time on giving you kind of slowing down a little into this kind of more of a quieter type of, like a more low profile sort of horror, where it's just about the danger that's around you and how you deal with it, right? Like, what is this robot gonna do next? When is it gonna scan him at one point, and then what little movements is he gonna do that's gonna, get it to kill him or alert him that he's actually alive, type of thing.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a fun story. I mean, it's not a standout for myself, even though it's an enjoyable watch. Yeah. I'd say this is sort of like in the middle range for myself.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, is because this story, I think the right word to say is it tries to create the suspense. And when you're trying to create this sort of suspense and this tension, it takes time to build it. And when you do shorts, it's really hard to build that tension. I always find that that's the case. Like, there are a few shorts that I've seen which really execute that really well. But this one, I don't know. I mean, I think Michael B. Jordan is good. But, like, in the way that he's portraying it, in terms of, the character and what they're creating for this character, and how he gets there. But I don't know. I think I'm also a little bit like in the middle. I can see the merit behind it, and I had a lot of fun with the whole, how he ended the robot. but I don't know. It's not one that I particularly probably would want to. I don't know. It's not one that I'm particularly super impressed with.
Okay. And finally, we enter the season with The Drowned Giant, which, for my money, is my favourite story of this season. Directed by Tim Miller and written by J.G. Ballard, one of my favourite writers. It also features in the cast Stephen Pacey, who was played Dell in Blake 7, which, if you're lucky, is a very exciting thing because he likes Blake 7. So, go send him a message over at TV Good Sleep Bad and tell him about how much you also love Blake 7 if you enjoy it. But no, The Drowned Giant is a story set in modern day where a giant washes up on the shore, and a group of academics set out to observe it and basically try and figure out where this giant has come from. And the story basically follows one of these academics who basically narrates how the giant was sort of like treated over the coming months as it decomposes, and it's generally broken up, so they don't have this giant just like lying on the shoreline. But at the same time, it's kind of interesting, and it brings to mind like Jurassic World, where you have this group of people, like the younger characters, who's like really fascinated with dinosaurs still, and then you got his older brother who's like busy playing on his phone because dinosaurs aren't interesting anymore. We're seeing that same evolution of people's interest with this giant. It's like initially people like super interested and excited, and it's this big curiosity, and then ultimately they just stop caring. It just fades into the background. This mythical creature just no longer has any sort of magical allure to it, and I thought it was just a really interesting and touching story. So
yeah, for sure. I think the drowned giant is definitely one that I'm not sure everybody is going. I'm not sure it's for everybody, because it's definitely like a slower story and takes a different pacing from what you would normally expect from Love, Death, and Robots. But at the same time, I mean, his whole, it's pretty much a monologue, the whole thing. And this entire monologue brings a lot of very, I think, realistic points about humanity. But just through the observation of how the people around are treating this, giant that gets washed ashore, who is essentially just a giant human, And when you think about the splendor of him, and then you see him falling apart and then being chopped up, and the whole idea of, just people being super disrespectful, and in my way, I actually saw it really disrespectful as people started walking all over it, and then, doing graffiti, and then it's like, if this is how it's something that you always say, right? You can't have nice things.
No, we can't.
And this is this is how you feel when you watch this. Is you get something amazing that washes up, something unique, something that is unseen before, and it's treated with disrespect, essentially, and insults, and as it becomes more chopped up and more whatever, the scientist brings up a point that it actually makes him more human and more vulnerable. And I think that as you see it disfigure and being pulled apart and deteriorated, the interest starts going away because it's no longer in its human form, which makes it less appealing, I guess. And I don't know. I think it's just a very deep story. The story that I was trying to talk, and those very real and a little depressing about how humanity is,
Definitely so, and I love the fact, just the attention to detail, like when they're walking on the giant and they see like his cupped hands and it's got like the fish swimming in it, and there's so many moments in like those early part of the story where I thought the giant was like going to wake up or just something was going to happen, but he never does.
Yeah, but that's the thing is, this reminds me a lot of, I mean, it's a horror movie that I watched, but it in a similar way, it reminds me of Autopsy of Jane Doe.
Okay.
Where, you know, you have this, where in the entire story is about an observation of a dead person. And obviously, Autopsy of Jane Doe is a completely different beast in its own horror realm. But, like, The Drowned Giant is a more, you know, emotional and more kind of touching story that touches base on like, more topics of humanity and stuff like that. So it's very different, because as you end this, you kind of go into the fact where the different parts of his body is now being held in display in different places. And sometimes even, you know, mislabeled. And you just have this very... It's just this, like, kind of sad kind of realization about humans and the world, you know?
Yeah, you see his penis is being displayed in a sideshow carnival, but mislabeled as a whale's penis. But I love the fact the story, it's everything in academic terms for his penile gland.
Yeah.
And I like the fact that when you got the butchers who've got, like, the bone above the shop and... yeah, so as you were saying, it's... there's something about this the story that just keeps ringing true in time and time again. That made you sort of nail on the fact we can never have nice things. In many ways, it reminds me of over here in Portsmouth. They built this life-size Brontosaurus statue, and it was being toured around. But the general consensus was that they were going to make it a permanent fixture in Portsmouth, as this, just have it on the green, just this giant Brontosaurus there, and it'd be interesting. You could go right up to it, but then some jackass set fire to it, and we no longer have it. And it just so many aspects of that just remind me of this story. The fact we just can't have nice things. You can't have just things that exist for the magical wonder without them losing their luster and people just desecrating them. So that was my takeaway from this story anyway. So, but yeah, is that, you know, we're a society that quickly gets bored with everything eventually, and apparently, I don't know how a giant can drown, but apparently it can. Even that's apparently not enough to hold the world's wonder. So, but that was obviously my favourite of the season. What was your favourite though, Kim?
It's really hard to pinpoint what's my favorite, because I feel like everything has a little bit of something that I like. If you say, like, standout of the season where I really remember it afterwards, it would have to be Ice, that I really remembered a lot of. The world and the brothers and that, it really stood out for me. But then, you know, I mean, it's hard to argue, you know, All Through the House I really enjoyed, but I like you said, it was really short for what it was, but then I don't know how they would have made it longer. You know, through our discussion, I actually think the Drowned Giant is pretty good as well, but it's just because it's so different from what you'd expect in Life, Death, and Robots. I feel like, for a lot of people at least, it probably feels a little bit misplaced. But I actually feel like this is the one that talks the most about death, because if you think about all the other ones, there's not really a lot about death other than Snow in the Desert, which kind of has a little bit of everything. So, you know, if you were to think about, you know, talk about that, then I think it's that sort of thing. But I mean, Pop Squad is also really good because of obviously the voice cast, and it's definitely a standout in terms of what it is. But I think, like, you know, when I talk about the season, I think the one that comes to mind first is always Ice. So maybe that's my favorite one. But I don't know if I have a favorite right now, because I feel like it's not so cut and dry like the first season. First season, there was a lot of ones that really just stood out, and you could really see how polished a lot of the shorts were. I'm not saying this one's not polished, but it's there's a lot of variety, and it really depends on, I think, how you're feeling or what you're in the mood for watching or what type of story you want to tell. Everyone has its own merit in what it's trying to do. But then there's also a lot of, there are still its own downfalls.
Yeah, of course.
But I mean, I would say Ice and Pop Squad are probably top on my list in terms of season 2.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I would probably put Pop Squad up there as well, so I think on a similar sort of page. I mean, is there any sort of things you would like to see for season 3 at all?
I think the best is to go in with an open mind. I really do hope that, season 3 they bring a little bit more, I don't know, bring some more variety. Because this season, I think one of the big criticisms that I do have of it is I feel like some of the worlds are a little similar. You're either on a barren planet, ice or desert, or you're in this world of robots, a robotic future where either they've gone corrupt or they have or they've been, set off to go crazy, And it feels like when you have those little pieces in the middle, that's when it feels like it's cut well. In some ways, I think that I would have liked, say, the 2 shorts of The Tall Grass and All Through the House to have been spread out. Because I know the first season, we had like a different order. Like everybody got kind of a different order of how the show was seen. But I think this season, it's all pretty much everyone had it the same way. And in some ways, I would have liked the sequence of it to be cut in the middle where you had Tall Grass not back to back with All Through the House, because it almost feels like it's like 2 similar features together. Both of them are kind of creature features. And if you cut it in between with that and say like the robots and stuff, it might feel a little bit more balanced. But I don't know. I think that's one of my things. Is it feels like they doubled a lot of there is still a lot of variety. The worlds are all different in their own regards, right? Everyone is very creative in creating this futuristic world or whatnot. But yeah, I mean, like there somehow something is not jiving with me for this season. Like I'm not as excited finishing this season as I was last one. And it might have to do with the fact that you ended on a pretty, tame type of story with the drowned giant. So but it's one that really it makes you really think a little bit more. This one ends on a lot of twists, which kind of gives you something to think about, whether it's the end of All Through the House or the end of the drowned giant or even the Tall Grass. Everything leaves a lot of space for expansion. And if I was thinking about like a season 3, I would actually not mind seeing some of these ideas expanded into maybe like a second short if they're not going to do a full feature, and kind of like carry the idea forward type of thing, or use at least some of the worlds and create an alternate story. But because that way it could be standalone, but still kind of for people who have seen the second season, it's kind of like it has a bit of a throwback element.
I think for myself, I would love to see more humorous episodes and just more monsters. That's what I hope for in the next season. Like, I mean, we obviously had the humorous elements of the story here, and I think with the first story, I think it gave us that sort of humorous element. But I just kept waiting for like another story like When the Yogurt Took Over.
Yeah.
Just a random little story like that. And I think Automated Customer Service comes close to that, but I think with the day when the yogurt took over, it was just so detached because it was like the oral history of how sentient yogurt became the dominant leader of society as a whole. I think this sort of like alternate history timeline was what made it stand out. And monsters, because I say it's always fun to see monsters. So like another Sonny's Edge or Beyond the Aquila Rift, something to really spark that sort of creativity. Because I mean, yes, it's always fun to do robot stuff here, but and I appreciate the fact that they branched out and didn't just limit their vision, and you could have something like the Drowned Giants and it still be a super effective story. So I'm happy to see more of that, maybe more alternate histories. I think that's what I bet. Just my 2 main things would be just to see another good comedy episode, and maybe another couple of good monsters in there. Because the Christmas episode, All Quiet for the House All Through the House, it's a fun monster design and it's a fun payoff. And it just gave me wonder. It's like, I just really want to see another monster episode here. So.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I think in some ways what I take away from what you're saying is you want some kind of ridiculous humor type of thing, because when you talk about first season, there was a lot of humor moments. Even when you talk about the first one where it was the first one I saw in my season was 3 robots.
Yes,
that still had a lot of humor to it. And then like you said, the yogurt one, and then. And there was also the one in the freezer with the Ice Age and the alternate history or something going on in the freezer. There's a lot of little, that one wasn't a long sequence either. And they were able to make that into a really type of fun type of series. I think what here is, a lot of it is some really serious stories. Very dark, very serious. Whereas, we really just started off on a high note of humor, and then it kind of just slowly gets more intense as you get to The Drowned Giant, which is some heavy content, in my opinion.
Yeah. But no, I'd certainly, while it was a change of pace from the first season, and obviously the shorter season didn't help it. But at the same time, I wasn't disappointed by what we got. I know there's people out there who are like, oh, it wasn't as good as the first season, but I still enjoyed it. I think it's because we're so deprived of original stories at the minute, and something that's not a franchise. Because I think that's the problem at the moment. We have a lot of stories which are just trying to establish franchises and worlds and things, and just to have that Outer Limits Twilight Zone style of storytelling is just really a welcome sort of change of pace at the minute, and something that it'd be great to see more anthology shows find its way, but there certainly doesn't seem to be anything on the horizon, especially with the cancellation of the new Twilight Zone. It would seem that we're sort of limited once again for our options on that front.
Well, I mean, if you have Shudder, you still have Creepshow.
That's true. We do have Creepshow. That is correct. I stand corrected. So we have 2 shows. So, but yeah, maybe we can get a third. Maybe do a fantasy one or something.
Yeah.
But do it in a in sort of a twisted sort of way, something like Wizards or Fire and Ice. Just that because that was the thing. The whole project is derived from Fincher and Miller trying to do a remake of Heavy Metal, which was again an anthology collection, but that had fantasy elements in it as well. So it'd be fun to see them go off and do a show which has got a fantasy take on the Love, Death and Robots style, but do it with an adult slant rather than just a whimsical slant, which fantasy often has the habit of slipping into. So. Well, that obviously brings us to the end of tonight's show. Thank you for listening, and let us know what your favourite episodes of Love, Death and Robots were. If you haven't done already, please do hit the like and subscribe button where you happen to be listening to us, and you can follow us on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're on Instagram, and just let us know what you think of the show. But we will be back again very soon with another After Hours episode, so we look forward to you joining us very soon for that. But until then, good night.